Hello and welcome to Wedding Wednesdays with Weddings Online. My name is Kelly and I'm a former wedding planner and blogger, and I'm obsessed with weddings. If you're planning a wedding in Ireland, you're in the right place. You're going to learn the tried and tested methods to planning your dream wedding without the added stress. Think of this as your one-stop shop for everything to do with planning your wedding in Ireland, with me, your new wedding planning bestie, and a cup of tea. This is Wedding Wednesdays with Weddings Online. Well, welcome to a brand new episode of the Wedding Wednesdays with Weddings Online podcast. My name is Kelly. I'm your host today, but I actually have a very special guest with me because we're talking all about destination weddings in Ireland, because Ireland is an incredible location for a destination wedding. And I have an expert who's going to tell me a little bit about their experience with planning weddings with couples who are specifically coming all the way to Ireland for their dream day. So Howard, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Kelly.
Well, I thought, you know what? I think you could probably introduce yourself even better than I can. I'd love to know a little bit about you, who you are, and some of the venues that you are part of, because I know destination weddings and particularly couples coming from other countries to get married in Ireland. I know that's something of a passion of yours. So tell us a little bit about the venues that you're part of. Let's hear a little bit more.
Okay. Well, I head up a family called the Corscadden family. We've been in hospitality for over 100 years, and our company is called Romantic Castles of Ireland. We have a castle in each province and a family member running each of the castles. So we started off with Cabra Castle in Kingscourt, just an hour north of Dublin. I head up Cabra Castle. Cabra Castle is the golden goose, or the mother hen. So it was the first of the four. And from that, we purchased Ballyseedy Castle down in the Kingdom of Kerry. It's the only castle hotel in the county, and Kerry is Ireland's main tourist destination. Beautiful scenery, beautiful country. And Ballyseedy Castle is headed up by my sister Marnie and her family. Then we moved back east to Leinster to Bellingham Castle. Bellingham Castle is just half an hour north of Dublin, and it is a private rental castle. Beautiful castle on the banks of the River Glyde. My brother Patrick runs that with his wife. And then our last purchase was a property in the west of Ireland, a destination castle called Markree Castle, one of the finest castles in Ireland. And my other brother, Adam, and his wife run that. So that makes up the four castles of Ireland, one in each province.
That is so special. I think something that I love about, destination weddings in Ireland is there's so many family-owned wedding businesses like yours. And I think it's such a special thing to have these incredible locations, spread across the country, but there's such a connection, like a family connection between those who run each of those locations. And I think that's really, really special. And, something that I would love to hear from you is, as somebody who is, based in Ireland, you've got the family ties, and of course you're passionate about weddings. And I know you've worked with a lot of couples who have come from outside of Ireland to get married here. I'd love to know, what is it that you love about Ireland as a destination wedding location?
Well, I think it is the personality of the Irish people, first and foremost. I think once you come to Ireland, just the warmth of the Irish people, you're treated like a family member. It's not just another wedding. It's part of our family getting married in one of our beautiful destination castles. That would be first and foremost. Then, of course, you've got the scenery, beautiful countryside, the greenness, and the castles are unique in the fact that they are they're each very, very different, but they have a lot of character and charm. Beautiful locations, and because they have that family feel about them, like we have our family pictures dotted around the castle, and we encourage the bridegrooms to bring their family portraits and family photographs and dot them around the castle and make it their home for their couple of days that they're spending with us.
I really love that. I think something that you said that is really powerful actually is just that family connection, that because the people of Ireland are so welcoming, so hospitable, that for anybody coming into the country, you immediately feel like you're part of the family. Like I've had that experience, getting into a taxi from the airport, to a different part of the country, you're immediately welcome. Somebody can sense you have a different accent like I do. And then, you don't feel like you're an outsider. But I feel like that is such an important thing, especially when you're planning a wedding. When you're coming to get married somewhere, you want to feel comfortable. You don't want to feel like your wedding is just another day for the people who run the venue. You want to feel like this is important to them as well. And so I think that's definitely something that sets apart the Irish weddings from other weddings. And so that's such a good point. Apart from the obvious scenery and history and all of those lovely things, which are also true. You hit the nail on the head.
No.
But I have got a few questions. I know that for couples who are planning a wedding from abroad, there are lots of things that can seem really foreign to them. Lots of, rules and things and ways of doing things that may feel a bit different. And so, for most people planning a wedding, they've never done this before. And so I thought I'd ask some of the common questions that couples ask and, to get your perspective as somebody who's a wedding industry professional. So I'll fly through a couple of those questions. We'll see how many we get through. But the first one that's a pretty common question is, how far in advance should a couple start planning a wedding if it is a destination wedding? Like, what would you recommend?
We'd recommend between 12 and 18 months in advance. That would allow you strong availability in advance. Pick a date of your choosing. It would allow you to make travel arrangements, get those discounted price rates from the airlines, etc. Save the date, give the guests plenty of time to know where the wedding is, when it is. So, also, you get a better choice of vendors and suppliers if you book well in advance. So anything from 12 to 18 months, we recommend.
That's really good. That's super helpful. Definitely helps people to put together a bit of a timeline of when to start doing things. And so thinking about, planning remotely, is it possible, in your opinion, is it possible for a couple to plan the entire destination wedding off the ground from their hometown? Or is it necessary for them to actually visit the venue and have a look at things, while they're planning everything?
Well, it's not necessary to visit the property. You can do it by virtual tours and photographs. We have a very experienced team here that can talk the potential bride and grooms through the venue, walk them through the venue with virtual tours. Technology nowadays is so fantastic that you feel like you're there. So it's not necessary to visit, but at some stage you will visit.
Yeah.
And someday you'll have to visit at some stage. But to plan it, no, you can do it all by virtual tours and photographs and using the expertise of our team.
Okay, so you mentioned your team, and so I'm not going to assume that this is true for every wedding venue in Ireland, but certainly for the Romantic Castles of Ireland, you guys have an incredible team. So, from your perspective, is it necessary for a couple to have a wedding planner if they're not going to be doing the kind of on-the-ground planning and coordinating, or is partnering with a venue team enough to kind of have all the plans come together effectively?
That's a difficult question, and it really depends on the bride and groom. It's not 100% necessary, but some couples or some brides would feel more comfortable with a wedding planner, and some brides, they're confident enough with our team that they can manage the process themselves. So it's whatever the bride and groom are comfortable with.
Yeah, that's true. I suppose, from my experience with dealing with amazing wedding coordinators who are part of venues, you still get the opportunity to ask for planning advice and tips and tricks or supplier recommendations and that kind of thing, which I suppose is a lot of what people would expect from a wedding planner. So a venue coordinator is almost like, like a magician who kind of helps pull everything together, which is really special. So
True.
So that's good to know. Yeah, I suppose you're right. It does come down to what the couple feels comfortable with. But I mean, I know from dealing with the Romantic Castles of Ireland. I know you guys have an incredible team. And so, yeah, couples often feel just very comfortable and confident with you guys. So that's helpful. Another question that people often ask is about the weather. So I know Ireland has a reputation for unpredictable weather, and people often want to know if it's possible to have an outdoor ceremony in Ireland and what kind of weather considerations you would need to have in mind, or backup plans, or, how would that kind of thing work with any of your venues?
Okay, the time of the year obviously would be very important. We're very fortunate, though. We have a lot of verandas, a lot of canopies. So we have a lot of rain. So, but we have pretty good forecasting as well. So we certainly can have venues outdoors. We can make that decision on the day. But should it rain, we have enough canopies and umbrellas and large parasols that we can have the venue outdoors. And still, if it rains, we can move it indoors very, very quickly. Okay. So, for example, the granary outside, we can have 220 guests outside. You just open the French doors. If it starts to rain, we can bring them inside within minutes. So the veranda has got a large canopy overhead, and we can do 120 people in that patio area. So, yeah, you can get married outdoors, but it is weather dependent very much so, and time of the year.
That's true. And I suppose, you guys are so experienced with making those decisions on the day or in the days leading up to a wedding to be able to say, we advise that you do move things inside. But if you wanted to wait till the day, we can see how things go. Yeah, exactly. And then you would know how to make that change so guests aren't standing outside in the rain. No. Okay. That's good to know. That is good to know, because you know what? I have experienced some really lovely days in Ireland, and I know you can get those lovely, sunny, warm weather days. And so, it is possible. But it is good to know that having a backup plan within what the wedding venue can do is actually very, very helpful.
Always have a backup plan.
Yes, I've said that on the podcast.
Highly recommend
so many times. That's the thing. If people don't consider the weather, they can end up in a bit of a pickle. So having a backup plan is just very, very helpful. But also knowing that the wedding venue can accommodate a backup plan is probably the thing that's going to instill the most confidence in the couple.
All 4 castles would have a backup plan for the weather, but all 4 castles can have the venue outdoors or indoors.
That's great.
As you said, backup plans, very important.
Yes, definitely.
And having that flexibility.
So actually thinking about how the venues would be laid out, where you could be outside and then if you need to change to be inside. Is it possible to rent the venue and the estate exclusively so that if you do need to move from one room to the next, you're not, kind of competing with another couple that's hosting their own wedding or another event that's happening on site at the same time? Like, how would you navigate that as a venue manager?
Okay. Well, the first thing is each of the castles guarantee only one wedding in one day. So you're never going to be competing with another bride. The day is yours. Now, 2 of the castles, Bellingham Castle and Markby Castle, they're both private rentals. So you take over the entire castle. There will be nothing else happening in that venue except your wedding. So they can give you 110% service and attention on the day. Okay. Cabra Castle is all the areas concerning the wedding are private to the wedding, and they don't mix with other guests at all. And that is the same for Ballyseedy. Ballyseedy can be an exclusive rental. It has 45 rooms, but it also has, it's also a hotel. So if a bride doesn't want to take over the 45 rooms, there would be other guests around the hotel, but Ballyseedy Castle has its own belfry, church and private function room, etc., just like all the other 3 castles.
Okay, that definitely helps, because I suppose if you're thinking about, if it's going to rain and I have to move inside, what's going to happen? It is helpful to know that if there are these options to exclusively rent the property, it's all yours for the whole time. And so if
the whole time.
That's great. I think that's another thing that just helps couples to feel really confident and relaxed, knowing that they're not going to be, we've all seen those movies where somebody accidentally double books a wedding and, you're competing for this patch of grass with the beautiful views. So to know that doesn't happen is really helpful.
That's a hotelier's nightmare, a double booking. So we'll not mention that.
I know that earlier when you were talking about the lovely venues that you know, that the romantic castles of Ireland are, you know, have within them, you spoke a little bit about the different areas that they're located. And I think something that people often think about if they've never been to Ireland before is how far are the venues from the major airports? So, you know, Dublin, Shannon, Cork, that kind of thing. Like, you know, is it easy to get to the venues from those airports? Just thinking about guests traveling in and that kind of thing. Like, how would that work?
Okay, well, the nearest would be Bellingham Castle. Bellingham Castle would only be a half an hour from Dublin Airport. Dublin would be the main airport into the country. So it would be land at the airport, straight up the M1, 2 miles off the motorway. You're in the village of Castle Bellingham, and the castle is located right in the middle of the village. Second, then, Cabra would be an hour from Dublin Airport. So again, you'd come up the motorway, and then a half an hour into the countryside, you'd have Cabra Castle. Then down below in Kerry, you've a small provincial airport called Knock Airport. Now, guests could fly into Dublin and then get a connecting flight down to Knock. And then Ballyseedy Castle is about 15, 20 minutes from that airport. And lastly, you have Markree Castle. And guests would fly into Knock Airport. Sorry, getting my airports mixed up there. Markree Castle, you fly into Knock, and you'd get you'd get a bus then from Knock to the Markree Castle, and then Ballyseedy Castle, you fly into Farranfore Airport, and that's 20 minutes away.
Okay, so basically, it's easy to get around. You know,
it is. We're a small country.
Yeah, that's true.
It doesn't take long.
But I suppose for somebody who's never been before, they're thinking, how does this work? Especially if a couple is coming from the United States, which is a much bigger country, thinking about, you know, how they would navigate flights with, you know, the scale of the country that they're from. So, that's always good to know that, you know, within an hour you can be at your wedding venue. It's good for guests to be able to plan when they're going to arrive, how they're going to make their way through to the venue, which actually brings me to my final question for you for the day, which is, you know, from your perspective, how early should a couple and their guests plan to arrive before the wedding day?
Okay, the bride and groom, we'd recommend 3 days before the event. 3 days to get them to go through the final details, get settled in. They'll be having makeup, hair, etc., just to finalize all those final details. And then for the guests themselves, the day before the wedding, we'd recommend the day before the big event. And then they have the big event, and then a lot of guests would have a second day. So they'd be staying 3 nights with us. That would be the norm for an overseas wedding.
That makes sense. And then I suppose if anybody is, you know, making the trip to go all the way to Ireland, you want to travel around afterwards and explore and do all kinds of things. So, you know,
absolutely. It's a small country, but it's a beautiful country. So a lot of guests would then use that opportunity to extend their stay and stay a couple of more days around touring the countryside and maybe visit one of the other romantic castles of Ireland. Who knows?
Go on a whole tour. Why not? Tour.
Absolutely.
Well, Howard, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today, for sharing your expertise. I know like a lot of what you shared is going to be very helpful for couples who are, you know, in the thick of things. They're trying to plan a destination wedding. They don't know anything about the timeline or what the country is like and what the people are like. And it's just super helpful to hear from you and to hear all of your experience. So thank you very much for being on this episode. What I will do is I'm going to share a link in the notes for this episode for where couples can have a look at all 4 of the romantic castles of Ireland. So if they want to check out any of them, they'll know exactly where to do that. I'll put that in the notes. But again, thank you so much. It was awesome to have you here. Thanks, Howard.
It was my pleasure, Kelly. Lovely talking to you.